to the Monday, November 18th, 2013 meeting of the Lake Forest City Council. Could I ask the clerk to call the roll, please?
Mayor Schoenheider,
Here.
Alderman Novit,
Here.
Alderman Waldeck.
Here.
Alderman Moore,
Here.
Alderman Pandeleon,
Here.
Alderman Tack,
Here.
Alderman Reisenberg.
Here.
Alderman Palmer.
Here.
Alderman Edelman.
Here.
9 present, 0 absent. Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Biddy. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? First item on the agenda this evening is reports of city officers. First subset is comments by mayor. I just have one quick comment. As most of you know, or probably know, or hope know, Market Square has a new owner. And I think it's an exciting time. Certainly going to have an opportunity. We met recently with the new owners. They are owners and developers of very high-end retail operations. They own things in Beverly Hills, Boston, Soho, Upper East Side of Manhattan. They have some great plans. And I think the city and our community as a whole should be very excited about it. I think it's going to take a wonderful, important asset and turn it into a destination. So we should all be excited. It'll be interesting to watch as things progress. They've worked very closely with staff. They've got a lot of things they want to do and some great plans, and it's going to be an exciting time. So I think we should all be very excited about it. That was it for me this evening. Next item on the agenda, comments by City Manager. Bob Kiley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I just wanted to acknowledge in regular session and thank the City Council for joining us today for an extended Finance Committee meeting to go over the budget. I don't think the general public does appreciate all the time and energy the City Council puts into reviewing the budget. And as I said in my opening comments earlier this evening, that the City of Lake Forest is in very strong financial shape today. But that's because of actions of past city councils to put us in that strong shape. And I think while we have some issues ahead of us, the council is poised to make some tough decisions to keep us in that strong financial condition. And I think continue to keep our AAA bond rating and other financial accolades that we have. So I want to thank you all for, I know it's a long day for you and the staff appreciates it very much. So that completes my report for this evening.
Thank you, Bob. I will tell you, too, on behalf of the council, thanks to you, and most importantly, thanks to Elizabeth for the enormous amount of time that she put into the budget packet. It was very well done, and tonight I think all of us would agree it was easily understandable, and particularly for those non-finance folks, that made it even better. But it was very helpful, and we certainly appreciate the time you spent. Next item on the agenda, comments by council members. First item is on the Finance Committee. Gorton budget presentation presented by Finance Committee Chairman George Pandeleon and Gorton Community Center Board Member Mark Ventling.
I'm going to defer to Mark Ventling for this, so carry on.
Mark, good evening.
Thank you, Mayor Schoenheider and Alderman Pandeleon and the rest of the City Council for inviting Gorton here today to present a short presentation about our 2014 budget. We always want to start off by saying thank you to everyone who's involved in making Gorton a success. There are thousands. In addition, I also want to thank our Executive Director, Brenda Dick, who hates praise but has been responsible for, along with a wonderful staff, really making miracles at Gorton happen. So thank you, Brenda. A year ago, we came and put forth some goals. I want to just recap how we did, and I apologize for the small writing, but we wanted to get this on one slide. We wanted to improve our fundraising results, which we did. We also wanted to restart our investment in capital improvements. We've made a few positive developments there, but we have more to do, and we realize that. Increasing programs, events, and services. We increased that about 50%. A couple of programs of note. Safety Town was a great success this summer, and it was the idea and also a lot of the work involved was from community volunteers, which was especially encouraging. I also want to mention the two next events which are coming up, the Holiday Shop for Kids and the Christmas Celebration for Everyone. Those are in December, and you can visit our website at gortoncenter.org if you'd like more information. And last but not least, we wanted to increase our operating profitability and cash reserves, which we did. Just a quick update, major developments in 2013. We completed this agreement with the City of Lake Forest. We increased our cash position, increased our revenues from operations, and actually our projection is for a small profit this year, which is up from an operating loss historically, and that is a really encouraging sign. We also signed 2 more leases with not-for-profit tenants that actually completes our lease space, that we have no more vacancies at this point, and we have a great group of not-for-profit tenants. So the 2014 budget, you can see the highlight numbers. We're still projecting, again, a loss in operations for next year, but better than the past. Not as good as this year, but we budget conservatively. Fundraising, continued improvement over last year. And as you can see, we're budgeting an income at the bottom line. 2014 goals, again, we want to increase our services to the community and also to our resident partners, provide them with some support. We'd like to grow the awareness of Gorton in the community and also get more participation and support, increase our fundraising results, and then continue to invest in capital improvements. So that is a quick recap of our goals for next year. And I'm happy to answer questions if you have any.
Questions for Mark?
I have a comment.
Go right ahead.
Actually, I do have a question. I can't remember anymore what year it was, but it wasn't long ago that Gorton essentially went broke. Was that 2010?
July 2010. Yeah.
And so that was not even 4 years ago. And, you know, here, there's, did I go back a couple of slides? I just want to make sure I get these numbers right, if you wouldn't mind. Okay, so, well, cash, I want to, the cash one was the thing that really struck me. So there's now $1.6 million
Right.
in cash. I mean, this is a remarkable, remarkable turnaround from questions that were being asked about whether there was any place for Gorton anymore in the community and whether we should just explore completely other uses for the facility to, you know, a vibrant, active, financially successful organization that's continuing to grow and prosper. And, you know, in really 2 or 3 short years, an incredible amount has been accomplished. And Mark, you and your board, and I think enormous kudos, if that's not redundant, to Brenda Dick for just, you know, pulling this all back together again. I mean, there was a group of us that pulled it from the brink, but that's really all we did. And all the work that's put this thing back on solid footing has been done since then. And you know, congratulations to everybody, and just keep it up. It's an enormous success story. And it seems like the formula, whatever the formula got changed to, is a formula that's successful. So,
Thank you. A lot of people have been responsible in one way or the other for this success. So on behalf, thank you.
Any other questions or comments of Mark?
Mark, can you, off the top of your head, might want to acknowledge the rest of the board members who are currently on the new configured board?
I'm sorry.
The Gorton board. Who else are, for the record here, it might be good so they can hear their name, a shout out to the other parties that helped you. Go ahead.
You're asking me to name the rest of the board members from
Yeah.
memory? Okay, well, Blair Nagel is the chairman. Jamie Wildman is the treasurer. Barrett Davy. Do you want to come up here and do this?
Yeah, I think Brenda should step up and at least get on camera. I know you like to stay in
This
the
was really
background,
an
but
excuse just to get Brenda at the podium.
I'm going to need some help, too. Yeah, Blair Nagel is our chairman. Jamie Wildman, our treasurer. Barrett Davy is our vice chairman. Steve Pace is our secretary. Ann Francesi. Now, here we go. Liz Brandell. Lynn Kennedy. I'm going to do the ladies first. David Wad. He's not a lady. Katie Ford. Go around the table. Peter Cherry. Alan Lerner. Sally Downey. John Luby. Okay, we got the directors. I think who are there others? I know.
We're leaving someone out.
We are leaving someone out. This is very bad.
Sorry.
Next year we'll be prepared, Bob. Thanks for the question.
Now I'm going to have to make.
Well, I think it's important to know that while the two of you have certainly done an awful lot to get us to this point, there are a lot of other people that are behind the scenes too helping out. Gorton wouldn't be where it is today without those people.
Absolutely, Bob, and also the incredible staff that we have. The majority of whom live in Lake Forest and Lake Bluff, but all of them are incredible and not only work there, but donate their time and energies beyond that. So we're very thankful for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. We actually need a motion to approve the Gorton budget presentation.
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please, Biddy.
Alderman Novit.
Aye.
Alderman Walden.
Aye.
Alderman Moore.
Aye.
Alderman Pandeleon.
aye.
Alderman Tapp.
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg.
Aye.
Alderman Palmer.
Aye.
Alderman Edelman.
Aye.
8 yeas, 0 nays, motion carries.
Thank you, Biddy, very much, and
Thank you.
congratulations.
Lynn Kennedy, Alan Lerner, John Luby, Kate Rother, Tim Sheffield, Mark Bentley, David Wad, Katie Ford, Sally Downey. I think we covered them all.
Perfect.
You can call us on your way home if you remember anybody else.
Next item on the agenda this evening, consideration of an ordinance restating and reaffirming the ordinance number 2008-08 and an ordinance establishing the 2013 tax levy. First reading presented by Elizabeth Holub, Finance Director.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and City Council. As we discussed at this evening's Finance Committee meeting, immediately preceding the City Council meeting, this item consists of a package of 2 ordinances. The first, as indicated, an ordinance restating and reaffirming Ordinance 2008-08 and the tax levy ordinance, both of which this evening's action is requesting first reading, granting first reading of these ordinances, and both would come back on December 2nd for final approval by the City Council. The tax levy ordinance is time sensitive. The tax levy ordinance must be filed with Lake County in December, so it must be approved by the City Council December 2nd. The first ordinance restating and reaffirming Ordinance 2008-08 came about as a result of discussions by the City Council over the last few months. The primary objectives of the ordinance are summarized on this slide, and as a result of consensus of the council at previous discussions. The first 2 relate to the debt service levy. First, that the imposition of a set dollar limit of $2,589,906 in the ordinance 2008-08, which was the tax extension in 2004, should appropriately be adjusted by an inflationary factor to recognize that the cost of capital improvements for the city will increase over time. Therefore, the proposed ordinance that's before you this evening provides for that amount to be adjusted annually by the Municipal Price Index, which is published by the Illinois Municipal League. And if that index is no longer published, for that to revert to the CPI. The second change is also related to the debt service levy, and it is to recommend that this item be revised to allow that the cap related to the debt service levy limit be applied to the sum of any debt service levy plus any capital improvement line item levy to allow flexibility for pay-as-you-go financing to avoid interest costs and reduce the overall cost of capital improvement. The city does not currently include a capital improvement line item in its levy, but we wanted to provide the flexibility for the city council to, in the future, provide for that and to reduce costs of capital improvements by avoiding interest costs and just allowing for a capital improvement line item on the levy and have that debt service levy cap apply to the sum of those two line items. And the third change is related to the aggregate levy, to provide that under specific circumstances by which city council may exceed the property tax cap, the exception would require 2/3 vote of the city council, could not be more than 5%, and would have to be used for either capital improvements or replacement of revenue lost due to the state altering its distribution of funds allocated to local governments. So there are specific circumstances outlined in the proposed ordinance under which this would be allowed. There was some discussion at the previous meeting related to 2/3 or 3/4. There was clarification that in Lake Forest, 2/3 vote does indeed mean 6. But there was some discussion whether or not there would be a need to change that or a preference to change that language to 3/4 instead of 2/3.
I think it's a good
Make a
idea.
motion to approve the ordinance with the change of the 2/3 to 3/4.
Is there a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. First reading does pass.
The second, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Second item under this is the ordinance establishing the 2013 tax levy ordinance. We have seen several of these schedules. These were included in your packet. Attachment 1 just simply provides for determination of the levy under the property tax cap. Attachment 2 outlines how that is allocated based on the different line items in the city's levy. You can see that there's a section of the city's levy that is applicable to the tax cap, a section for the bonds, and then a section of specific line items that are excluded from the tax cap, which relate to a certain portion of the fire pension levy, the special recreation fund, and new growth. You'll note that we did, per previous discussion, propose an additional item, but based on discussion at the Finance Committee meeting this evening, this item is stricken, and I have a future slide that will provide for that change in the ordinance for your motion. This rolls these items up into the specific line items on the property tax levy. And this is the more applicable schedule that shows the impact of the proposed levy on the average homeowner. We use a house of $800,000 market value. The 2000 tax extension compared to the proposed 2013 levy. This schedule, attachment 4, is without the additional $580,000. So this is the levy that is being recommended. This would be an overall tax levy change of 2.82% in the total levy. And an $800,000 home would see an estimated impact of $86 over the prior year's tax bill, based on current estimates and projections of equalized assessed valuation for the city. And this page just summarizes the line items related to the proposed levy. This top schedule includes the original $580,000 that was originally recommended for inclusion. This is the grand total, $59,298,434 that was in the original ordinance, or I'm sorry, in the original total levy. The ordinance without bond funds, the $57,338,721 is what will correspond to the ordinance that's in your packet. The debt service levies occur based on ordinances approved and each bond issue was approved. So we don't actually levy bond levies each year. So your tax levy ordinance does not include the bond fund line item. So if you look at the subtotals in blue below that first yellow line, these are the subtotals revised to exclude that $580,000. So to remove that $580,000 and revise the numbers to the 2.82% increase, you would simply need to include in your motion this evening a motion to amend the ordinance improved in your packet to amend the total tax levy ordinance to the second yellow number, which is $56,758,721, which excludes the $580,000 additional. That makes sense.
So moved.
Questions?
You know, could I, I just want to clarify. The 580,000 was the number that was being considered as a potential increase in property taxes. And that is no longer, well, if somebody moves as recommended, that is no longer being considered for next year.
Right. That's correct.
Can I also make one other point while this slide is up on the screen, because I think it's also relevant leading into the next discussion about fees and charges, is that when you take a look at the line item for city general, that is primarily the fund that pays for police, fire, public works, most of the operations of the city, generally with the exception of water and golf course and some parks and rec. And you'll see that the total new dollars under this, which is less than 1%, is roughly $124,000. Half of that coming from new growth, half of that coming from existing residents, if you'll, as you see. So the total new dollars really coming into the city council from the major revenue source of the city, because this represents about 50% of the revenue coming into the city of Lake Forest, is less than 1%.
That's great. Thanks, Bob. Any public comment on this issue? Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to grant first reading of the ordinance establishing the 2013 tax levy at the amount Elizabeth mentioned, $56,758,721. Do I have a motion to that?
Moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda, approval of an ordinance is abating 2013 tax levies for various general obligation alternate revenue bond issues. First reading, Elizabeth.
Thank you. This is an fairly straightforward administrative item, but the City of Lake Forest historically issues all of its debt as general obligation debt, which means that when the bond ordinances are filed, they are all placed on the debt service tax levy. However, many of these bonds are intended to be repaid from alternate revenue sources. Therefore, each year we need to pass abatement tax levy ordinances to remove those specific items from the tax levy. So this schedule shows the actual gross tax levy by bond issue. So the number at the left column is the actual bond issue, corresponding bond issue. The full debt service for that bond issue next year, and then the source of funding for which those amounts are going to be abated for the 2010B, 2010C, 2011A, and 2011B issues. So we have four abatement ordinances submitted for City Council first reading approval to abate those levies and then bring us down to the net debt service levy of $1,959,713, which is that debt which is intended to be paid from by property taxes.
Questions for Elizabeth? Any public comment or questions from in the audience? Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to grant first reading approval of the ordinances abating tax levies for various general obligation bond issues.
And move to grant first reading.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All of those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, passes unanimously. Elizabeth, one more. Consideration of an ordinance approving a fee schedule. Ordinance is adopting new fees relating to sanitation, parks and recreation, electric vehicle charging station, and landscape licensing, and an ordinance amending city code to authorize the city manager authority in administering fees. First reading.
We spent considerable time on this package this evening during the budget meeting, but this is a package of several ordinances. We have an ordinance approving a comprehensive fee schedule. That includes an exhibit that has all city fees included, with those proposed for change highlighted in yellow, those that are proposed as new fees highlighted in orange. The city adopts specific ordinances for any new fees. So you have 4 separate ordinances for 4 new fees that are proposed. I'll go through each of those separately. The first and most significant is the sanitation fee. We've talked about those over the course of the last several months. But at its October meeting, the Public Works Committee recommended for City Council approval a fee of $1 per pickup for collection of refuse. You can see the calculation on the left. Fee per pickup of $1, collection to remain twice per week, 4 weeks in a month, so the fee per month would be $8. It is proposed that the fee would be assessed as a $24 quarterly fee on the water bill for each household receiving the service, and that would generate annual revenue of $620,000. I don't know if there's any additional comment or question related to that. We talked about that quite a bit this evening.
I just want to point one thing out. We just said we're not going to raise property taxes by $580, but we're going to tax people a different way. This is mentioned before, but for the new audience, I mean, we're really we're still getting more money from the residents to run the government, which I don't have a problem with, but I wanted to make sure that's.
And we did talk about the fact that this is an unrestricted revenue source. It is available for either operations or capital, and so the council will be able to provide direction to staff as to whether their preference is to put it all in the capital fund for capital improvements, split it between operating and capital budgets, or put it in the operating, but I think there appeared to be some consensus on putting that in capital, but that decision did not need to be made today and can be discussed as we go through the budget deliberations. So.
Although, Elizabeth, I think to follow up from our finance committee, we had a pretty robust conversation about the capital issues. It came to light, obviously, that there's going to be, and it very quickly be, a significant capital shortfall in the budget. We've discussed the idea of appointing an alderman from each ward to a subcommittee to explore the current capital budget priorities, and I think that's going to happen very shortly, with an eye toward making sure that we're prudent with how we use the dollars that we're being given. So.
Also, I'd point out the sanitation fee applies per capita, not based on the value of your house or anything. If you own a house, everyone pays the same fee.
Right.
My objections remain my objections.
Thank you.
The other 3 new fees that are proposed, I'm sorry, did I miss? Okay. There are 3 other ordinances, each proposing a new fee. First, from Parks and Recreation, a watercraft sand storage fee. Second, an electric vehicle charging station fee. This is being installed in the Central Business District now and has been discussed at a previous city council meeting, so this would just institute the $1 per hour charge that had been discussed by the city council. And finally, a $25 penalty for landscape license contractors who submit their license applications after June 1st. So those are included in the package. And then, as noted before, as part of the ordinance approving the comprehensive fee schedule in the exhibit, proposed changes in fees are highlighted in yellow. Some of those changes include eliminating the online vehicle sticker discount, which is currently $5, annual adjustments of parks, recreation, and golf fees, clarification and simplification of the building permit fee schedule, and other incidental changes, all of which are included in the exhibit. And then, as noted, you have supplemental memos from each department providing a basis for those recommendations. Lastly, you have one additional ordinance in the packet. It relates to the administration of fees. In order to more effectively administer the collection of the city's fees, it's recommended that the City Council adopt an ordinance providing the city manager specific authority to waive or reduce fees in the best interests of the city for specific fees and charges. The proposed ordinance would provide authority to reduce or waive fees up to $5,000 unless approved by City Council, and any reduction or waiver that exceeds $1,000 would be reported to the Finance Committee as an informational item. So that is a packet of 6 ordinances, and I'll be happy to entertain any questions.
Any questions for Elizabeth? Any comment from the public?
I'd like to reiterate a comment I made before about the electric charging station. I don't think we have enough information to set a dollar fee. We don't know what kind of electricity it draws, what our actual cost of electricity would be, and we should at least cover our own costs. And then we don't know what's equivalent, how long a charge of your electric car is equivalent to getting a gallon of gas, and maybe we should have that similar. I just assume we not set the fee tonight on that if the council is amenable, or else we set it higher than $1. But that's just my thought.
Bob, I don't know if you weren't here the night, we did discuss it, and the thought was, you're right, we don't know the cost or anything, but at least the first year, we wanted to encourage people to use electric or hybrid vehicles, and so if it's a loss for the city, it's a loss. It's only a couple of units, right?
Well, yeah, it's 1 2-unit. We do know the cost. The cost is basically 47 cents, and that's why we were going to charge $1. So we were covering all of our electricity costs. I apologize. The question I thought was raised earlier was, how long does that allow somebody to drive, equate it to miles per gallon kind of thing? And I don't have the answer to that, but I do know the dollar charge will cover 100% of the electricity cost. If you amortize the cost of the capital, I think it's a number of years out there, but it certainly covers any out-of-pocket cost for the electricity.
Okay, well, if we adopt it tonight, I'd say we should maybe revisit it next year.
For sure.
We will revisit it actually annually as a part of this, yeah.
So I need a motion to grant first reading the proposed ordinances.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none? Nay?
Nay.
1 nay. Alderman Reisenberg is a nay. Item passes. Thank you, Elizabeth, very much. Next item on the agenda, items for omnibus vote consideration. There are 5 of them. Excuse me. And if anyone wants to take any of these separately, we can do so at the end. Otherwise, I'll ask for a vote for all 5 items together. Item number 1, approval of the October 21, 2013 City Council minutes. Number 2, resolution of sympathy for Wayne Cole. Number 3, resolution of sympathy for Danny Caruzza. Number 4, approval of health insurance contract renewals. And number 5, approval of a 3-year contract with Credentials Solutions. Anyone want to take any of those items separately? If not, I'll ask for a motion to approve all 5 together.
Mike was
Yeah.
indicating.
You know what, I didn't realize number 4 was right here, because I did ask for some information today about our health insurance and what it's running us, and that's more towards the operational end of the city's budget than not capital improvement wise. But if we approve this today, the health insurance contract renewals cover what period of time, what dates?
Deshay, would you mind coming up and sharing some information with us?
Yes, Alderman, it goes into effect January 1. It's for our January 1 renewals. The reason we bring them to you now is there's only one meeting in December, but the largest item is the excess liability renewal, and the one that we're recommending is agreeing to not put any lasers on our contract if we do renew right now, as opposed to waiting until later. And a laser, just as a brief explanation, is we have several large claimants right now, and the other companies were wanting to look at those and possibly pick those out, and instead of saying that they would reinsure us at the $125,000 level, which is our reinsurance level, they would want to laser those, pull those claims out, and not pay anything on those until they reached a higher level of claims. So the city would have to absorb that responsibility.
Deshay, could you maybe, and I know the PCA committee heard the presentation, but maybe you or Peter Wright, who I know is in the audience, just talk about some of the changes. I think that goes to the questions that Alderman Edelman asked earlier today with his email about what other modifications are being made to sort of tighten up the cost control on the health insurance program.
Sure. We had to make some changes because of the Affordable Care Act. Although some things have been pushed off that we don't have to do for another year, there still are some things that go into effect as of January 1, 2014. What we've decided to do is remain a grandfathered plan, which means that we don't have to implement some of the provisions of the Affordable Care Act. But it also limits us on how many changes we can make to our grandfathered plans. So what we've done is we have increased things like our co-pays and our out-of-pocket maximums and our deductibles to the extent that we can increase them and still remain grandfathered. And then we are also rolling out a new plan, what we call the basic plan, which it's not grandfathered because wasn't in existence before, but it meets the criteria of the Affordable Care Act and their coverages that they mandate. And we roll that out primarily at this point. It would be more attractive to retirees, but it also will become our basic plan when we do have to bring on what we consider seasonal or temporary employees a year from now. It would be what would be offered to them. And it also will become our basic plan for PSEBA. And if you'll recall, PSEBA is the Public Safety Employee Benefits Act, where if they're injured in the line of duty, a police and firefighter is injured in the line of duty, they can apply to receive their health insurance free for life. So that would become our basic plan. It is considerably less expensive than the other plan, but it's also a very different type of plan in the way it's structured.
All right.
I would, Mike, let me also do hitchhike on what Deshay said. I met with her as part of the PCA kind of responsibility, and I think, not sure everybody understands that we are self-insured for all of our medical benefits. And really, what we're discussing this evening in this ordinance is really about stop-loss coverage.
Correct.
It's the approval of the stop-loss coverage carrier along with the professional benefit administrative organization. So this is all admin stuff and in stop-loss coverage ordinance, not necessarily, but in addition to what Deshay just discussed. And before that, Don and I met with all of the changes which Deshay discussed and the consultant, Peter, and it seemed fine with us.
Well, let me tell you where I'm coming from. Because this is in your line of professional work, Jack, and you understand it a heck of a lot better than I do. I was reviewing this current year's budget, and if you go through it department by department, it showed compensation, and then it showed medical insurance and dental insurance, and on a department by department basis. And I looked at those and just did some rough calculations, what the medical and dental came out to as a percentage of the wages, and it seemed pretty significant. So then I went through and did a matrix, and I added up the total expense of medical and dental for every department and came to a grand total and divided it by the number of employees in the city, and the figure was astounding to me. But I assumed we're paying for health insurance, and so we've got a Rolls-Royce health insurance plan. Now you're telling me it's self-insurance. So we're setting these funds aside in a self-insurance fund?
Instead of having a contractor, like a Blue Cross Blue
Or
Shield,
Humana or whatever.
Humana, whatever, like, like many public and private organizations, we self-insure. The reason we self-insure is because it tends to be the most cost-effective way of administering your health benefits.
Okay, well,
But when you do that,
Yes.
you also have to have stop-loss coverage, because
case
this,
of a
we
catastrophe.
cover the first $125,000
Yeah.
of the claim. Over and above that, because you can get million-dollar claims, you have to have stop-loss coverage. Otherwise you can get deep financial issues. This really is approval, this ordinance is approval of the stop-loss carrier.
okay.
This,
I get it, but let me just go another step further. My calculations show our medical and dental costs were about $14,000 per employee, which is double what I pay for my family health plan. So I shot an email to David and to Bob and asked what they pay per employee for health insurance. And Bob, you came back like $7,000. So I don't know if your statement that it's more cost-effective is correct, if it's basically we're budgeting double the cost per employee.
Mike,
it's
you know what?
cost-effective in terms of the administration. We're talking about two separate issues. This ordinance is dealing with the administration of the plan, including who the stop-loss carrier would be. Not the basic, Mike, I think what you're referring to is the basic design of the plan and the overall cost per employee, not cost to the city for administration.
Like, you know what I might suggest is, and Jack's right, tonight's not about that, but I might suggest you visit with Deshay or Peter. I know one of the things I learned at PCA as well was we've got a fairly substantial funding obligation for retirees. And that's a big part, I think, Deshay, of some of that cost.
Correct. We are required statutorily to allow our retirees to remain on our health insurance. Now, they pay for the premium. We don't cover their premium, but because we're self-insured, we do cover their claims. So, but we can't force them off and that sort of thing, which many of the carriers don't want you to have retirees on your plan. So we don't have an option in that regard.
Then can I just ask that we take 4 off the omnibus, and maybe between now and December 2nd, I can get a primer from you?
That's,
Mike,
timing-wise, you should
Mike,
probably.
it's not necessary. I think your issue is a valid issue, but it's on plan design and other aspects that are forced upon us by the state that are driving our health insurance costs higher than what normally you would think normally would be the case. And quite frankly, it's much higher than 14,000. That's a whole different issue than the administration. I think at some point, either, as Don said, we could have a separate primer on just the design features and the cost drivers of our health insurance so that everybody would understand, like the pension, why we are being forced, generally by mandate, to pay more than what we would think would be reasonably expected.
Bob, do you want to make a comment?
Well, I think the only other comment, and I agree with everything Alderman Reisenberg said, and I think what we can do is if you're getting the information from the audit, it also doesn't reflect what the employees are contributing towards their health insurance as well, because that would show up as a separate revenue. But I think between, now and the next couple of weeks or so, we can get you sort of that breakdown and also break it down by category in terms of which health plan that they're involved with and whether it's retiree or whether it's a full-time employee and so forth. Because as it's been stated here, we have some limitations that we can address and deal with, but you're right, there's some that we can't, and some of it is imposed on us either through union contracts or state law as well.
There's also a time sensitivity here between first reading and final approval, if I'm not mistaken, right? And we only have one more meeting this year, is that
Well, I defer to the rest of you folks, but I still like to get the primer on it because I'd like to learn more about it.
I guess I'd also like to know, because I know in my bank, we pick up a certain amount of the ultimate cost of the premiums, but typically we have limited that and left a meaningful amount for the employee to contribute. So they choose a plan that they really feel they need, and they just don't say, well, somebody else is paying for it. And we've held that. We're probably going to have to raise it this year, but I'd like to understand what the city does to incentivize, intelligent choices by the employees of the plans they use.
We had a very good PCA meeting, Bob, to that point, and I think, Deshay, it'd be great for you to come in and give the council a briefing on kind of the process, the alternatives. You've looked at a couple of different alternative
Absolutely.
policies and options, as you mentioned, trying to get the costs down. So I think it'd be really helpful. I agree.
Fine.
I'd like to have a motion to approve the omnibus as read.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
For the first reading,
No, just the omnibus.
I mean, approve it.
This is not an ordinance, so it doesn't require 2 readings.
Thank you.
I need a second. Roll call vote, please, Biddy.
Alderman Novit.
Aye.
Alderman Waldeck.
Aye.
Alderman Moore.
Aye.
Alderman Pandeleon.
Aye.
Alderman Tack.
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg.
Aye.
Alderman Palmer.
Aye.
Alderman Edelman.
Aye.
8 yea, 0 nay. Motion's carry.
Thank you, Biddy, very much. Next item on the agenda this evening is ordinances. Consideration of an ordinance approving a recommendation from the Building Review Board, and this is final approval. We did hear this at our last meeting, but I've asked Kathy to come and give a quick summary if she could. Kathy Cerniak, Community Development Director.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. You did grant first reading of this ordinance at your last meeting. There were some questions raised specifically about drainage. Just as a reminder, this is a unanimous recommendation from the Building Review Board. It is a recommendation for approval of demolition and construction of a replacement residence on the east side of Edgewood, a few lots south of Spruce. Since the last meeting, city engineering staff, including the city engineer, did review again the drainage and grading plan for this property and confirmed that it is workable and it is based on their recommendation. It will direct water to the rear portion of this property. There was a question raised as to whether this property could be connected to the storm sewer. There is no storm sewer in Edgewood Road. Could a storm sewer be constructed in Edgewood Road? It certainly could. This is one of those neighborhoods that was developed many, many decades ago, and storm sewers simply weren't part of subdivisions at that time. The water in this neighborhood does travel along the rear portion, the east portion of these properties. The plan that has been approved for this property will actually require a curb be installed along the south edge, along the south property line, south edge of the driveway, to assure that the water is deposited further east on the property than it currently is today. The Building Review Board saw this petition on 3 occasions. At the direction of the Building Review Board, the petitioner reduced the mass of the house. This replacement house does come in at about 80% of the allowable square footage. The hardscape surface includes pervious pavers, and there will also be a swale required on the north side of the property. I did speak with the neighbor to the south today, Mr. Lincoln. He is out of town, wasn't able to be here. The city engineering staff has previously visited his property and has offered some advice to him on modifications he might make to his own property to help that water flow in the direction that it does flow. We also offered to Mr. Lincoln to meet with him and neighbors to the south again to walk that area and discuss what they might do together to direct the flow of water to assure that it stays away from the homes. Finally, we will also work with the developer of this property through the construction process to assure that prior to the curbing being installed, that proper measures are taken to prevent erosion and runoff onto the neighboring property to the south. If you choose to do so, it would be appropriate to grant final reading of the ordinance that begins on page 111 of your packet. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Kathy on this matter?
Everyone thinks this drainage is gonna work. What if it doesn't? So that's the south property owner's problem, Mr. Lincoln's problem? Or does he have any kind of redress? Has anyone talked about having the person that'd like to build this house post a bond or sign an agreement that they will do further things if there is drainage into the finished basement of this house?
The water currently drains to the rear of these properties. The water currently flows in a south direction, and what this project will do is actually direct the water further to the east so that it is deposited at the rear of the property as opposed to where it flows more freely now. No, we have not discussed any requirement for an escrow deposit or anything of that type, but we will certainly work closely with the petitioner throughout the process, as we do with every development, to ensure that it meets all the applicable requirements and to assure that water is directed appropriately away from the neighboring home.
I share the sensitivity of the neighbor to the south. I mean, if it works, great. If it doesn't, he's sitting there holding the bag. And we've approved this, and the city has signed off on it. You know, again, what is our responsibility? What should our responsibility be? Is it like, well, we're 90% certain it's going to work?
But there's nothing any different about this development than there is any other development in terms of assurances. Kathy, is that correct?
Not in terms of assurances, certainly with the measures that are being taken, as we see redevelopment in these tight neighborhoods, the measures being taken on this property do reflect our growing understanding of what we need to do to direct water. I would invite any comments from the city attorney in response to Alderman Palmer's
I would also
question.
ask Mike Edelman, Councilman, you were also out there, were you not?
Twice.
And?
We had a major storm either the day after our last council meeting or 2 days later, and I went out the very next morning, and there was no standing water. There was a pizza-sized puddle in a couple places on his asphalt driveway, but there was no standing water. And then I was back out there again yesterday afternoon after the rains that we had.
Mike, is there a storm sewer to the house?
There's no storm system
Neighborhood.
in Edgewood.
Okay.
And Mr. Lincoln called me last night. Did you give him my number?
I did.
No, he called me.
Kathy's request.
He called me last night and we conversed about it. And he really wasn't too knowledgeable about whether there was a storm sewer in the street or not either. And he asked me, you know, it would be nice if you could compel the petitioner here to put a storm inlet in that driveway. And I told him that I thought, to the best of my recollection, I asked Bob Ells that question, and that there isn't one there. He says, well, my neighbor to the south has some sort of an inlet. I said, well, where does it go? And he didn't know, and then I suggested and he's got an inlet in his own backyard. I suggested put a camera in there and see where it goes. But after 2 heavy rains, 2 weeks ago and yesterday, it just doesn't appear to be an issue. And there's no curb in the existing driveway. So by putting the curb in, that's necessarily going to divert the water. It's going to be like a rain gutter. It's going to shoot the water to either to the east or a little bit down to the street where the driveway pitches back towards Edgewood. But I don't see it being an issue.
I have a question. I learned a long time ago, and maybe incorrectly, but maybe tonight's a good time to clarify. If you live uphill from your neighbor, that the water, that's not your water that lands on your yard, it's the water. And it goes from your yard to the next yard, to the next yard, to the next yard. And it's not, if I'm above my neighbor who's lower, he can't complain about the rain coming into, I'm not obligated to keep the water on my yard, am I? It just keeps running downhill till.
Bob Ells, he can speak to that more
I mean,
articulately.
I think this is the rain in Spain.
I knew that was coming. I knew that
I believe it's Mr. Ells' water.
Yeah, I know.
the real estate things.
That's what happens when you start at 4 o'clock, right?
Yeah, I'm just,
Subordinate tenement and all that stuff.
but here, doesn't, you just get it,
Bob, do you want to comment
it
on
goes
that?
downhill and there's, your neighbor can't say, get your water off my yard, can he?
Correct, Alderman Moore. That is the premise of the Illinois drainage law, is that water flows downhill. And because you own a parcel, you cannot restrict water from flowing downhill, getting to a ravine or the Lake Michigan or a river, stream, whatever.
But pulling the city attorney, if you alter that condition, then it does create a liability, it would be my understanding. If it's a natural flow, that's one thing. If you change that flow, that's a different story.
But why are we putting a curb in this yard?
If I might offer 3 general comments, one in addition to the water being Mr. Elz's. The Illinois drainage law says that, as you indicated, Mr. Alderman Novit, that natural flow of the water is from servient or dominant to servient or high to low properties. Under our stormwater management ordinances, you're required to maintain that discharge so that, you know, whether it's by a retention pond, some kind of ponding, some kind of grading technique, you're not allowed to accelerate that water or increase the amount of it. I presume that that's part of the review that the city staff has done, at least on paper. So from that perspective, there should be a do no harm kind of aspect. The water's still going to go downhill. We're not forcing anyone to change that. So that's point number 1. Point number 2, in terms of the city's responsibility, when we issue permits, grant approvals and the like, under Illinois law, we don't do that for the benefit of a property owner. We're not an insurer. Rather, we're doing that for the public good. As a result, we don't have a duty to anybody, and absent a duty, we don't have any liability. That's set forth not only as a matter of common law, but also in the Tort Immunity Act. Will someone sue us? That could happen from time to time, but the law, at least if properly applied, would suggest we have no general liability to anybody for any such approvals. Third, in terms of recourse, if it doesn't go right or if somebody doesn't implement it correctly, that's something that the downhill or servient owner would have the ability to bring an action against the uphill owner under Illinois drainage law. There's a specific right of action under the Illinois Drainage Code to permit that. So that's generally how it all flows, forgive the pun.
Downhill, right?
Well, I just thought I'd mention that because on Thursday, we're having a community forum on relations between neighbors. I just thought I'd lead
way to
into
bring
it
that
by illustrating some of the issues that can arise. I think we've examined this quite well. Thank you.
Hey, Kathy, if I could pull back.
Are you hosting that?
Yeah.
As far as Mr. Lincoln and the house to the north, the drainage has been fully examined and will be further examined to make sure, again, we optimize or lessen the damage that would occur, if any.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other comments, Kathy? If not, I'll ask for anyone from the public who'd like to make a comment. Seeing none, I'd like to go back and ask for a motion to grant final approval of the ordinance approving the petition with the Building Review Board's recommendation.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please, Biddy.
Alderman Novit,
Aye.
Alderman Waldeck.
Aye.
Alderman Moore,
Aye.
Alderman Pandeleon,
Aye.
Alderman Tack,
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg,
Aye.
Alderman Palmer,
Aye.
Alderman Edelman.
Aye.
8 yea, 0 nay, motion carry.
Thank you, Biddy, very much. Next item on the agenda is new business. Alderman Palmer, any more additional comments on your session on Thursday evening?
Come to Thursday and you'll find out how many things one neighbor can do to irritate another neighbor and what your remedies may be.
Any other new business? Mike?
Just a quick comment. I had a call from a resident complaining that she couldn't email any of the city council members. And I tried it myself and there was a glitch. And I emailed Susan Banks and she took care of it in like 24 hours. And my resident's happy and I'm happy. And so I thank you, Susan, wherever you are.
There she is.
The alderman may not be happy because now you're going to get more
Yeah.
emails.
Well, no, and
Thanks, Mike.
Susan
Things were
was
kinda
lickety
quiet.
split on the job.
That's
and
great.
Seriously, if you have residents calling you complaining about a function on the website, there's your go-to person.
That's great. Any other new business? Next item on the agenda, additional items for council discussion. I just had two small things. Number one, don't forget the tree lighting on Friday, the 29th, in Market Square. Hope everyone will join us. And the last thing, this will be the last meeting before Thanksgiving, so on behalf of the council and city staff, I want to take the opportunity to wish everyone a very happy and safe Thanksgiving. Any other comments? If not, I'll ask for a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you very much.